And we're live, and welcome to another edition of Life is People. Tonight we've got Jennifer Knight on the podcast, and this is a guest I've been looking forward to sort of speaking to for a while. We're just talking, pre-hand about the life in Colorado over in the States, which I'm sure we're going to go into more, and also joined by well, for people who've been watching the podcast for Lee's back on the into this conversation. So before we go any further, Jen, I kind of really want to start right at the very beginning, and anyone that goes to your website and sees what you're doing, and one of the first things I have to I have to ask you about really, and I think it plays into something. You say on your on your website that you had you quit university after 90 days. Now, anybody can go on the website, on the line on the internet and find out the amount of great people that have left university after just maybe 1 year and stuff like that. From Steve Jobs to Bill Gates and stuff like that. And so the question I have to ask you, Jim, what made you A, give up the 90 days, and B, sort of start the 90 days?
Well, I was driven to start the 90 days. It was actually after my kids were a little bit older, and I didn't have kids in the house for the first time since I was a teenager, anyhow, I was selling hot tubs at the time, and I was introduced to a professor at UCCS because I sold him a hot tub. And he let me come to his classes, which were on European cinema, mathematics. He did a class on infinity, things that were entirely out of my wheelhouse. I mean, I was so intimidated to even have this conversation. It was overwhelmed, but he kind of brought me in and let me sit through his classes without paying, and I couldn't afford it. And then he kind of encouraged me to enroll as a student, and I did. And at the end of the basically 90 days that I spent, I found that I couldn't rack up that amount of bills to be at the university and still live because I was in poverty when I started. And so I gave up, but I gave up. And able to setting at that particular moment in my life, but as much as I possibly could with regard to rhetoric and writing and literature and music and those things that had me so fascinated by this college education that I never received when I was, quote unquote, supposed to, I guess. And I had to be doing what I needed to do to survive, and so, and I'm still in touch, with that professor, and can always reach out every time I have a question. But what I'm finding is this self-study kind of journey with certain guidelines that follow a lot of, teachings and things like that. I'm having to learn it on my own, but I have within my easy reach enough people who like teaching and like education that are willing to help me for free. So I claim UCCS because, I did go there and I was enrolled there, and I even wrote for their newspaper in that very brief time that I was there. I was on the newspaper staff, but it just wasn't where I was supposed to be. And I continue learning every day.
Well, that's the very essence of life itself. So, where did your fascination? I mean, you mentioned it. Then you had a fascination with writing and rhetoric and stuff. Where did this sort of start with you? Did it start as a child, and where did this sort of the whole process of you kind of even having an interest in all this begin?
And a fairly natural thing for me. I loved reading books when I was a kid. I was kind of that nerd that would, my parents could tell if the light was on coming from my bedroom door. And back then you needed light to read. It wasn't in a device, it was on paper. Not that this was millions of years ago, but sometimes it feels that way. So I would go into the closet and close the closet door and try to, capture all the light in the closet so that I wouldn't be in trouble for staying up late. But I would be so into some story I was reading that I've never followed rules very well, and I remember that being some of the first rule breaking I ever did was behind reading and storytelling on the
Oh, okay.
audience side.
Well, sorry, that just it begs the question. What can you remember any of the books that you were reading in in the closet at the time?
Oh, well, they weren't great works of literature, trust me. I mean, I was a kid. It was things like I remember Beverly Cleary. I remember Shel Silverstein, Steen or Stein, I don't know, Frankenstein, Frankenstein. I read it, but that was that was my only way of. Um, there are a lot I've read about, but I haven't had that actual life experience, and so I'll know words and not know how to pronounce them. But that's the great thing about being open to learning, I guess.
Exactly. Exactly. And you've been on this, as we, you're on this path now where I almost sort of say you're on a beginning of a journey. You're about to start your podcast, and you're kind of starting out this very process and stuff. Now, with that in mind, I mean, um, why the drive to do it, Jen? I mean, why not just sit back and think, well, okay, this world's all going, absolutely crazy, and I'll just sit back and be a passenger. What drives you to sort of think, actually, I'm going to put my head above the parapet and try to, get my voice across? What's the drive?
Well, part of it is, I've been ruined for regular work, and I don't mean to make it sound like I put the blame elsewhere, but um, I never could be, not that the same cubicle with no real stimulus, I guess. And I remember as a kid them being upset because I didn't go work at the post office like I should, kind of thing. And I can't do that. That those people who they are as mm, they've kind of opened up their mind. Not wrong. Can you help? And that's how it feels. I don't know. That's a lot of times I think people expect me to be this. I have gotten better at being the storyteller on paper. But kind of like, we were joking about getting out more and, being a part of things. I'm finding my voice, and I'm just now realizing how much of that voice has been focused and obsessed on becoming this writer thing. So I'm kind of coming back out of that shell, and it's, I'm not going to say I've ever been punished, but it's not easy to be a creative person when it's frowned upon. And so I guess that, there's some momentum that comes from that. There's some drive that comes from that. Um, I've always I've always loved a challenge, and anytime someone has told me I can't do something, uh, I will find a way to do it, which is, it depends on who the person it is who's telling you you can't do something. And at some point, I guess you just have to chuck it all and go with what you know to be right, even if you don't have the exact answers.
I completely concur, and I find one of the many things I find very inspirational about what you're doing and the path you're setting upon is the fact that just from my personal observations, and especially around this decentralized, crypto world, talking about freedom in general, you, this is my observations. It tends to be very male orientated. You hear a lot of male voices, and I'm not being, as a general overview, they tend to be very much the same. We're males. We can't help that. We tend to be very much focused, and I think it's really refreshing to hear a female perspective on things, because I think one of the crucial things I think going forward is that we don't just sink into team mentalities where we just have, okay, it's all going to be a bunch of really geeky blokes who are just going to talk about and build this new world. It needs to be mixed in the harmony of both angles. And that's what I find really inspiring about you, because I speak to a lot of females, and they immediately say, even just coming down to like certain forums, and they're saying, I don't want to put my head above the parapet because I just get bombarded by all the, a barrage of male opinions, and it's like trying to shoot me down, which I find honestly quite depressing. I would expect that in the kind of the mainstream world, not in our world. So have you found that? Have you found, have you had any blowback being, a female strong voice in a world that's generally dominated by males? Or am I completely not seeing this? And is it more, it's not so much male dominated in your part of the world?
Well, I guess like anything else, it's probably whatever I choose to see or give credence to. Um, I don't have I don't necessarily have that complaint, and I do what library I do have, what canon I do have. I would call it a gentleman's library, and I'm driven by a lot of the same things. But I mean, we're a species, I don't. Sometimes people that um, fight things that I'm not here to fight, and so I have to be very careful with the tools that I've chosen to pick up by the self-study of the things that I have learned from the gentleman's library, if you will. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. It completely sense. I mean, I, like I say, I just think I'm always fascinated by, anybody can step, like you say, creative people who can, step out. And I think one of the fascinating things where we are, as much as we were saying before we go live, Lee was mentioning, as much as the world out there seems completely nuts, and I mean it is. You can look at things and think, oh, it's just going out of control. But equally, this is the first time that we've got this ability. And when you mentioned this, Jen, I mean, we're probably about the same sort of, age and stuff like this. But it's fascinating that we have these abilities and the tools, and they're clunky at the moment, and we're still working through centralized sort of, systems and stuff. But we've got this ability, these tools at our hands, and I don't know. I look at it, and at times I've become very um, I don't know. I look at some of the creative people, and I know some of the most talented creative people, and they have this mentality of like, oh, I don't want to enter this world, and I just want to sit back and be an observer. I don't know. I contemplate that, and I wrestle with that in my own head a lot of the times, because I don't understand. I don't understand when, for generations and generations, people would have literally died for the ability to have the communication that we've got now, and we seem to be in this sort of lazy, comfortable era where we've got all these tools, and there's very few creative people coming up. I mean, that's just a reflection of how I find with creative people over here. Is this something you're finding over there, that, and maybe the sort of bigger question I sort of want to allude to is, you know, how do you sort of foresee these platforms going out, with you in the future? Because, as I said, we've got these tools in our hands, we've got the ability to sort of speak this, and I was just wondering how do you sort of feel this is all going to progress in the future? I mean, I meant this in relation to, do you think with the upcoming election that there'll be a blowback? Do you think the government are going to come in and say, whoa, 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 we can't have people going on the internet and having these conversations and discussing these free ideas? Or do you just think it's just sort of like the genie's out the bottle and there's nothing really anybody can do anymore?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm tempted, just on instinct alone, to go with the genies out of the bottle. But I don't know. I will tell you that. Well, I guess what I want to do is I want to ask you. You on a regular basis are in touch with more creative people than I. Next 13 to be. Um, how how often do you come across creative people who are terrified of the rest of the people out there and don't collaborate at all because of that.
Um, that's a very insightful question. It's hard to sort of quantify. I mean, I feel fortunate enough that I tend to sort of see this in, and I think if I look at it on a bigger sort of issue, I've always sort of held the countenance that if you give out positive energy and you're going out there, that it will attract positive energy. And the same equally, if you're going out with negative energy, you'll be surrounded by negative energy. So with that perspective, that which I tend to go out with a positive attitude, and therefore I'm going to attract lots of positive people. So with that perspective given, I would say maybe 30% of people. I think there's a 30% of that just. I think I've seen it all the years I've been around. I've seen there's a 30% of people, of creative people, that just never do anything. And do you know, as I was saying before, what I tend at times really frustrates me is that some of the most creative people, some of the most what you'd almost call geniuses, are in that 30%, and they become almost withdrawn and hide themselves away, and then you go round to their house or you see what their studio, and you're like, whoa, this should be out in the world everywhere. And I understand this, and I'm not. I say when I wrestle this and I contemplate myself, I understand completely, because to be honest, I've had years, I've had times when I've been like that myself and locked myself in a little studio, and all I've wanted to do is literally 24 hours, as much as I could stay awake, and just paint and never see anybody. And I get that mentality. I understand that, because at times when you're in that creative zone, all you do is want to create, and you don't want distractions. So I don't know, but what I'm finding over here is, and this is kind of more of a roundabout way of answering your question, is I see a great uprising at the moment. I see a great rising like I've never seen before. And I'll give you an example. Back in the 90s, I was in a band, and the prevailing, this is all when the Britpop was around and Oasis and all this, and there was this great general narrative in our country given about how we were this is all cool, and this is all great, and the Brits are taking over the world with music and stuff like this. But the actual reality on the ground was, it was just every band was just stabbing each other in the back. It was like crabs in a bucket. Everyone was just trying to pull each other down and shove each other. Even in bands, I saw the amount of bands I know where the singer was attracted by a record company, and he ditched his mates who he'd known for 10 years to go off and do some contracts in America with EMI or something. That was the prevailing attitude. And what I've seen now, I just don't see that anymore. I see this whole, and I can only speak really particularly of where I am based geographically over here. There's a great uprising of people who are wanting to collaborate, and I think this goes down to, this is maybe what we'd be discussing earlier, with the tools, because now with the whole of everything's changed. The music industry's changed. The whole of the creative scene has changed. There is no more like it was particularly 20 years ago, and it's becoming less and less and less every day we live on this planet, that the top of the pyramid, and those who were like judging who could have fame, who could have success, who could have this, who could have contracts, who could have record deals, that's just all dissipated. And on the back of that, it's obviously meant we've now got this huge ocean of creative stuff. And don't get me wrong, there's like any ocean, there's a lot of it is just sludge and absolute rubbish. It's just people just filling up noise. But the great thing with that ability to do, because there's no, like I say, central sort of power but anymore, it's almost forcing creative people to be kind of like, okay, we're gonna have to sort of form networks and build and collaborate. And so I find it, that's what I'm saying, I really do say, and I with all honesty, I think these are the greatest days to live in. And I think not only because of the tools we have, but I'm seeing it's almost like an evolution of mankind in some ways. And hey, don't get me wrong, we can spend a long time talking about how there's a whole other side of things that doesn't want this collaboration, and is quite happy to divide and put us in boxes. But I just think amongst the creative people now, there's almost a great awakening of this whole idea of like, okay, let's collaborate, let's build networks. And I just think it's, at the moment, I don't think any of this is seen in the general narrative of the media and the world out there. But the metaphor I continue, for people listening to this podcast, I apologize, I go on about this metaphor over and over again. But it's like we're looking out at a desert, and you look at it and think, oh, there's nothing there. It's just dry and it's barren and it's all doom. But all you need is one rain cloud, and then it rains for a couple of days, and then you go back to that same desert, a week later, and it's got, a whole diverse range of flowers and plants, and that's where I think we are generally with the days we live in at the moment. Yeah, we can look out and go, oh, dearie me, man, the world is absolutely, there is nothing. The music industry is completely, unless you're a 12-year-old girl, the music industry is great for you if you're a 12-year-old girl, but for the rest of us, it's all completely desolate and dry. But I think that the platforms like Minds, the general decentralization that's going on, there's people who are building stuff. I mean, Lee over there, all people are just building things, and these are like the raindrops that are just going to open up, and you're going to see a huge, I personally think, a huge flourishing of creative and just expression of humanity that we've never seen maybe for the last sort of 200-300 years. And I just think the only things that's what I'm saying is one of the points I really wanted to get into you. A lot of that will depend, and I go back to it when I said about the genie in the bottle, down to really the next election, because for whatever we want to look at it, whoever gets the levers of power in your part of the world next time is going to have a lot of power, and they could put the brakes on all this. I'm not saying they can stop it, but they could put the brakes on this. And I honestly think if that doesn't happen, or maybe if it does happen, there will be a resistance against it. But I just think it's inevitable. I think we're moving from an age of information that's just basically bombard us, and we're now leading into the era of the creative. And the whole point of creativity is you need a lot of your own self, but a lot of it is reaching out and having these kind of conversations. And I'm very inspired by it, and that's why I love what you're doing, because I think, okay, you're doing the same, and there's so many people doing this all over the place. And once you start to speak to people, I'm sure you find the same thing, you think, oh, wait a minute, most of us on this planet, we all think generally alike, because we've all got on the, we all know that we're on a rock, and we're all going to one day not be on this rock, and we might as well enjoy as much as we can. And I think the narrative and the way we've been led is all being led by the top, and they've made us into like a lab rats, and they've prisoned us, and they put us in this state of stress. And I just think that's generally starting to dissolve, and that leads into really, which is kind of really what I really want is kind of really get an in-depth perspective from your angle. I think I say that's dissolving, and things like what's going on in your part of the world in Colorado. The idea that, as we were saying beforehand, that the idea that humans can have the idea to stand over another human being saying to smoke a plant is illegal and you can be thrown in a cage for it, that's just it's antiquated. These are rules written down by dead people, and I just think that we're just going through an enlightenment stage. So that's a very long-winded answer, but I really want to kind of sort of relate this and sort of tie this in with what's going on in Colorado. Now, for people who aren't, like yourself and Lee, who aren't living there, maybe give us people who are listening to this a kind of an overview of what's going on in Colorado and where exactly you do stand, because I think a lot of people from this side of the world think, Colorado is just like Amsterdam, it's all free for all, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but that's where I'd like you and Lee to really sort of give us an overview of what it's like in Colorado and the issues you're facing at the moment with this whole prohibition issue.
I guess I'll just jump in there. I don't have necessarily any of those answers myself, but I am as curious as you are from the outside looking in, from my position here officially on the inside of the thing. And so what I've chosen to do a three-piece search that I want to do because you can be right here in the heart of it and have no earthly idea what's really going on. And so one of the first people that I reached out to was an attorney, and he's an attorney for mostly his art. I think a big percentage of art. I was able to reach out to him and just let him know what I was doing and where I was coming from. And so he is put together, a network of people who do live in this sort of fight every day. And I don't claim to be one of them. I don't claim to have. I don't speak for anyone else, but I find myself with a way to their women. I know. I don't know him personally. He's here in the same town that I'm in, but he runs a company called I Comply. And I'm going to set him up, hopefully, as you know, there's only 13 podcast episodes, and in the first episode, not that it's going to be sold, but I'm still setting it up as if it were, because that seems to work as a business model, right? On as a guest, we're going to be able to do a phone interview, and so that part won't be live, but it will be worked into the podcast itself, which will be live. So I'm going to ask him. So attorneys, people that are in different activist groups, I'm going to be asking questions too. As much as I would love to have all those answers myself, at the end of the day, I really am just a journalist. And so the answer is, as honest as I can be, I don't know. But I'm going to be asking a lot of people on both sides of the issue, and maybe we can hash it out and figure it out.
Well, just an overview. I mean, why particularly? Why did this all sort of start in Colorado? I mean, again, I'm looking over from this point, over from this side of the pond, and I think America's a huge country, and I'd imagine something like this would be, just as a general stereotype, you think, oh, the movement to sort of like decriminalize and prohibit, all this around marijuana would have started in somewhere like San Francisco, not in Colorado. So what is it particularly, and this is either to you or to Lee, what was it about Colorado in particular that's, because I say this because around the world now, as I said before we went live, you are seen as a kind of like a shining light for the, what's going on in America, really, and then it shines out to the rest of the world. So I'm fascinated. Why Colorado? What, of all the states that you've kind of got this mantle as being the ones that are leading the charge on this?
I suppose I have theories, but they're all just speculation. Um, Coming from, I actually manufacture a product in the garden industry, which is used here in Colorado in the MMJ industry, which are the fabric garden pots, the Wonder Pot, and just just by looking at business and sales and things like that, I think that Colorado is actually a place where there was a lot of illegally grown marijuana for quite some time, and there was a lot of people involved in politics at some point because of the maybe some of the wealth that they earned. But that's just speculation. That I don't have any kind of evidence for that other than just my particular viewpoint, I suppose. Jim? Tim?
I can only hear you, Lee. I can't hear Tim at all.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. My mic went. I was just saying, from an outside perspective, whereabouts legally do you stand in Colorado at the moment? I mean, for instance, if someone was to land in the states, and that the overview is understood that the federal law have state have one position and the state law have another. So if anyone was to walk into Colorado right now, and what would the actual legal status be? Could you actually smoke this in public, or is it kind of like the police are just turning over a blind eye and they're getting pressure from the top? What's the actual legal status right now in Colorado?
The funny thing is that I still treat it like it's completely illegal. Because I've grown up for so many years where it was. I never thought that it would ever become legal under the current uh, political structure. But go ahead, Jim.
I was just saying, if you look into the different areas of Colorado, they all have different laws. And something I heard recently is there are something like 330 different sets of rules within the state of Colorado for what's okay and what's not. Now that does not to say that I'm seeing, SWAT teams and things of that nature. It's just that in talking to attorneys, it's confusing. Sometimes you go into interested in finding out exactly what the laws are in that city or a county for that matter. Um, and it's hard to find, and sometimes even city clerks and county clerks have a hard time understanding the information that they have in front of them as far as what's currently okay and what's not okay. And so it varies. The city, it's okay medically, but not retail or recreational. And you just have to know where you are. And time, I also don't see a lot of the fear, so I assume with such gray areas.
Yeah, because again, this maybe I've read reports that because of the federal government, they still very kind of old school strict on this, and the state law has one thing. I mean, I've read stories about how the people who are making, and this be sure, they're making balls of money. They're making money like it's going out of fashion because you know what I mean. But they're having to drive around literally in vans with armored guys like it's back in the wild wild west because no bank will accept their money. I mean, has that changed, or is this just a bit of an urban myth that's written?
As far as I know right now, it is still not okay to use banks, but I know that it's something that's been a big issue for a while, and a lot of people are talking about change, but I haven't actually seen myself the change. Again, I'm not in the industry. I'm on the outskirts of it,
Mm-hmm.
looking into it. But I can tell you that it sets the hairs on the back of my neck when I hear people talking about how the legalization of marijuana has brought more crime to town, yet it's a forced cash business. How could it not? How
Mm.
could it not? Um, and so all I can do is more research.
Well, this is the area, Jen, that I find, again, I was saying this earlier on, I find very inspiration about what you're doing because again, and I'll put my flag in the sand and say this, why isn't every journalist doing this? This is, to me, it's always frustrated me that journalists were supposed to be the hound dogs, the ones that went after power, the ones that try to always chip away at the Achilles heel of the big and the powerful. And for years and years and years, and I can't speak what it's like in your part of the world, but everybody, all the journalists, just on everything, they just all fall into line and they just seek their careers and they just almost like lose the whole drive of what you quite eloquently spoke about earlier on, which has driven you to where you are right now. And it's kind of, to me, the worst part of this is okay, great, journalists can be like that and they're looking after their careers and you can see, try to see it from their perspective and think, oh, okay, I've got a wife and kids and a family to bring up and I don't want to rock the boat and stuff like this. That's great, and like, it's not something I can ever concur with, but what I find almost, no, I'll use this tonight, it's almost criminal on the back of that, is that they have, on the back of pushing this narrative that's just gone on all my lifetime and before, not only was it a racist narrative that was all based around, we go back, I see the history of where this all came from, you know what I mean, but the point is they've carried this narrative on, and on the back of that, as I said before, we've got human beings thrown into cages, we've got human beings dying of illnesses that could be cured by one plant, we've got a whole, we're chopping down forests when we could be growing, and it seems to me like all over one plant. And this has all been driven, and I can speak for myself. If I turn on the media over here tonight, I ain't going to hear any journalist giving a pro, this kind of conversation. They're all going to be like, oh, the day, and it's, to me, it frustrates me greatly because it's like, what happened? What happened? What happened where the journalists went from being these, like I say, these ones that were chipping away at power to just basically all falling in line and almost knowingly. I mean, this is the point. You can't live in the days we were discussing earlier. In the times we are now, where the information's out there, for a journalist not to go out and actually tell the truth about this, to me, it's absolutely. I think it's reprehensible. I don't know how your thoughts on it as a journalist are.
For me, I'm really careful with even throwing, the truth around because um, I'm learning new truths all the time, every day, and it's like the fact that yes, I'm doing this podcast and I'm writing this book, and I've even received two offers, publication up to pro bono and to build a portfolio and things of that nature. And I'm coming to a point where I can actually do this and survive, and so kind of not be punished by not being a productive member of society because I can't hold a job and build a bank account the way that I was supposed to the entire time. Crazy is as crazy does is the name of the book, and so I think it's actually a positive that I don't have all the answers, and I'm not going to pretend to, but I have so many questions, and I want to ask not only the people that I know agree with me, since I am obviously on one side of this thing. I sent an email out this morning because I'm still trying to book for episode 1, which I want to live stream on September 12th, is I think the date that I first set for week 1 of the tour. And it sounds very glamorous to be going on tour, a podcast tour with 1 episode per week in a different city in Colorado, with it sounds really romantic, but the truth is, it's just I'm mobile, and my home base is maybe not as physical of a thing as I once thought it was, and so there are a lot of big changes going on, and I know where I would eventually like to end up, but it's about going around to these different places and collecting their stories and putting them together. But it's not just one side. It's also reaching out to the people who are so opposed to this worst thing that has ever happened, and asking honestly, because whether they're for it or against it, they're sincere, and I want to hear from everybody before and even then I might not tell people what my findings are. I'll just share my research and they can figure out their own, or they can do their own research. I'm not going to tell anybody what to, and and I think it's a fine line between creative and journalist, but a dumb person is a bad thing.
Well,
It is rhetoric.
yeah, I mean, and I mean, the very essence of what you said there, Jen, it sounds, and as you know, I mean, to question everything it sounds so intuitive to a journalist or anyone that's writing and stuff like that. But as you said, it's such a rarity to hear anybody say that because it takes humility because we're all, I don't know, we're so much team mentalities around, so much almost cult behavior where it's kind of like you don't want to go down anything that's going to shake your beliefs, and then let alone, and I think it's what's needed. This is what I love about these kind of conversations and platforms like Minds that we go on, that there is this meeting of people who are going, well, yeah, well, none of us know anything, and ultimately that is the ultimate truth. Nobody on this planet knows anything, because if anybody comes to me and says they know anything, I'm like, well, okay, I'll take you out into the night sky, I'll get you to look up at that thing, and you tell me what's going on there, and if you could tell me what's going on there, then fair enough, but none of us know. And that's what I'm saying, it's the humility that is so refreshing in what you're saying, Jim. But to me, I mean, I don't. It shouldn't be like this. I shouldn't be saying to you, "Oh, it's so refreshing to hear you say this." This should be every single person who's a journalist, every single person who's a writer. What I mean, that to me is the fundamental thing that you should all start off as a creative person. Ultimately, as a human being, it's saying, let's question everything. Let's wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and question myself. Let's question. But that it's almost like become a hard path because everybody's on, it seems much more comfortable to go, I'm on team red, I'm on team blue, and I'm going to fly the flag and march off merrily down the road. And it's it's that's what I'm saying. That's why it takes people like you going out on tour and having conversations and I mean you'll probably find, like I found over the journey of this, you'll find that so many people they're so intuitively, and because they've been almost like us, we've been bred like prison rats to be so on guard, and when you sort of go into somebody and you have the attitude that you're having, and I tend to have, and say, okay, can we just have a conversation, people will just, they're almost astounded that anybody can come to them like that. And then you get to have open conversations, and you can have somebody that you walk into a room with and think, oh, we're going to clash on everything, and you walk out at the end of the day and you go, oh, actually we may disagree on a few fundamentals, but it goes back to what I was saying before. When you actually look at another human being in the eye, most people you look in the eye will actually go, oh yeah, we all know really it's just, we're just on this rock, and our time is short, and that just dissolves it all. But it's when you have one, like I say, when you have to immediately, the person, like you say, the journalist like yourself, or you walk into an interview and you're like, I've got this and I've got my viewpoint, and all I'm here to do is just to slaughter you and pull your ideas apart, and it doesn't achieve anything. And that's the current narrative. I mean, I'm sure, man, I look over to your part of the world and it's just all the media that you see in America is just all, yeah, and everyone's just fighting each other on, and it's like nobody wants to listen. And I think the great thing that you're alluding to, which I think is a very, I hope people do pick up that and, maybe listen to that and really take that on board. And if it be maybe the Zen moment of this podcast already has been having the ability, like you said, Jen, just to question everything and listen, which is two things that you're doing, which you're going to go, trust me, you'll go a long way with that attitude. And it's when you start deviating from that and you start to think, I know the answers and I'm not going to respect anyone's opinion and listen to anyone's other side, that's to me, that's the path where you don't want to go down. And I think it's really refreshing that you're going down that, and that's been your drive, and your continuing sort of path. Now you mentioned in brief, you mentioned your sort of tour of Colorado. So I mean, well, that again sort of enlighten us a bit more about that. I mean, you quickly mentioned that you're going to go around city to city. I mean, what's your sort of thinking of how you're going to sort of organize this, and like I said before we went live, I mean, will this be open to just people in Colorado? Will you opening this up to anybody in the world that can join you? I mean, what's your sort of thinking right now as you're about to start this journey?
Well, it's I'm a situational sort of entrepreneur. I guess there are entrepreneurs that have loads and loads of money lying around and they don't know what to do with it. I cannot give up on my writing again and try. If you look at my my photo there, it's an awning, and I don't think that picture that you see on this podcast represents me at all, but I will tell you that for 3 months I sold retractable awnings, and that's what I was doing to try. And even though my calling is clearly journalism, it's clearly writing, it's creative, I cannot ignore it anymore. So in a lot of ways I'm overcoming so many fears, because there are so many people who sometimes I'm finding have no idea what they're talking about, telling me how I'm supposed to be thinking, and I've been kind of conditioned to ignore that truth that I do have inside me for whatever reason. And it could be labeled, different words could be used, it could be labeled as different sorts of mental illness. I mean, it's dangerous in any number of ways to be a creative person in this world. And so I think that's one reason why I'm driven to do it anyway. But I think if you can hear the fear in my voice, I know that there's still a lot, and I know that's going to get better. But I don't want it to turn into, like you just said, me having any of the answers. I don't think I was driven to do this, or I've gotten this far because I had so many answers and other people needed to know what I think. I don't think that's my calling at all. And so but I have to make a living at this because I'm tired. of poverty. The goal for this 13-week tour is to stay in a hotel, nice, not nice, I don't care, I just, a hotel, and then record a podcast every Monday. And if that doesn't work out, then I'm working on a backup plan of a camper that I will live in for that 13 weeks. Most people who aren't lunatics don't tour Colorado in the wintertime. I figure why not? It's probably better to do it. I like going to Aspen in August as opposed to at the height of ski season. There are just, a different sort of Aspen that turns me on. Same place, I just prefer to go off season. All due respect to everyone who will spend every dime that they have to get there at the right time. I'm just going on instinct, like I said. So every episode, which is every week, is also every chapter. And that chapter is going to be built into a book called Crazy As Crazy Does. And I have no idea what I'm doing, but it's kind of, it's evolved to this point without me being in actual control. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to meet deadlines and do what I need to do to make this successful. I assume that everybody who's creative is some sort of lunatic. It just makes sense in my brain, and so I've just kind of conceded to that, and okay, I'm a lunatic, but really, if I use that inner gut, the truth is that only a lunatic writes alone. So not only can it be done, but there are so many people out there, and I don't care if those people are in California, Colorado, South Korea, Scotland, whatever. And it's not just, we're the same in so many ways, but we get so caught up in these fights, and I don't think enough people are asking why, just like what you said, and so that's what I'm supposed to do. It's what I'm here to do. I'm just a scribe. It's just that simple. It is my calling, and I don't have the right education, and I don't have a degree, and right. I don't think I've necessarily lived wrong. People do funny things when they're very hungry. I made a joke about the Hungry Rider games, and it fits, and those little jokes that, I say things like that out loud, and I realize a simple statement could touch. What do people think of when they think of the Hungry Rider games? But it's life. That's the way I'm living it right now, and rather than be ashamed of it, or, I mean, and maybe it's a hustle that I have the ability to put together a podcast and a book and get a paying job with magazines. How dare I do such a thing with no degree at all? Maybe that's true, and maybe it's not, but I can't stop it at this point. It has to live. So
Well,
here we are.
Well, Jeb, my retort to that would be, and we were talking about this briefly before we went live. No human being on this planet can stand over you and tell you what you can and cannot do. And this is the whole point. I was saying this before we went live. We've been almost conditioned in this world to basically have people pointing fingers at us, and we have to justify our existence to them and say, oh, like you were saying, where's your degree? Have you got? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Some of the greatest writers didn't have degrees. Like I said before, some of the greatest thinkers and doers on this planet all walked out of university without degrees and went there to university. What I'm trying to say is, it's overcoming the fear. Which is what you asked me earlier on about, the percentage of people, and it's that fear of going out and exposing yourself and stuff like this. But I think when it comes down to it, I think something you were alluding on to. I mean, you were saying about, it's a madness to be creative. I think the other way around. I think it's an absolute lunacy to basically to do a 9-to-5 job over and over again when you're not enjoying it, and you're just doing it just for the almost repetitive nature of just doing it. Because as you said before, I mean, I think there's not a human being on this planet couldn't turn around and say, well, when you get to your deathbed, the only things you're going to regret aren't the things that the things you regret are the things you didn't do, not the things you did do. And that's kind of got what, that's the essence of life. We're all chucked onto this rock. We've all got to do to make the best of it. And I think it's like I said before, a lot with fear, it is just a mind-generated thing. There is nothing to be fearful of. I mean, and let's be, I can say this without sort of sounding like, oh, he's talking, sophistry and philosophy and all. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying real fear is there's people on this planet right now who are, having bombs drop them. Real fear is having people who are, having Zika viruses and not knowing where the next meal is going to come from. So in some ways, we live in a very privileged part of the world where our fears are, oh, I don't know what people are going to think of me. And to be honest, does it really matter? Does it matter? Does it matter at all to you, Jen? That what everyone says, anybody says to you? Of course it doesn't. The purpose of what you're doing it for isn't to sort of to feed your ego. The purpose of what you're doing for is to feed, like you said before, that unsatiable effort of what's inside every human being to ask the questions. And that's why I look to people like you, and I'm inspired by people like you, because I think, great, you've got the ability to ask questions that I haven't got to do, and I haven't got the time to do. And that's why I love listening to podcasts and hearing information and stuff like this, because I think this is the essence of what life is about. And I think it's really, like I said before, and I can't say it over and over again, I think it's so inspiring and I'm going to be fascinated to watch how this all unfolds with what you're doing, because I think that the greatest step of any creative person is overcoming that fear. Overcoming the fear to put your head above the parapet, to put something into action. But I've seen this over and over and over again, and I feel like I have to shout it over and scream from the top of the hills all the time. Once people start taking that step out, the path almost comes out step by step by step by step. And I don't mean this in a very sort of thing, but I use this hashtag a lot. The universe has got our backs. It wants us. The universe wants life. It wants us to find our potential. And it's, and when you do this and you step out of the fear paradigm that we're all being pushed into, from what you're saying, well, you haven't got this right education. Once you do this, you realize that, wow, what was I afraid of? And that's what I try to get over to so many creative people over and over again. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier on. There is nothing to be fearful of, nothing at all. I mean, do you know what I mean? And that's what I'm saying. We look at it, and maybe I'm very kind of, I think sometimes we used to kick ourselves up the arse and think, man, go back 2 generations and there were writers and artists and journalists and people like that who they understood real fear. Their real fear was, their family being taken away at the middle of the night because they dared to write an article, or they dared to draw a painting that was against the paradigm. We don't live in those days anymore. And the worst we're going to get is a bit of social media blowback. Well, hey ho. And that's what I find extremely inspiring about what you're doing, and you've taken that first step of breaking the fear, and you'll find from after this, I'm not saying it's all going to be bed of roses, but you'll look back at it and go, wow, what was the fear about? And that's why I'm saying we need people like yourselves. I'm really inspired by people like anyone that does it, because the people who get disabled by fear, as you were quite rightly saying, Jen, are the creative people. And I honestly think that right now, with the way that technology is going to go and the way that it's the projections in the next few years, the essential thing for human beings as a species is having us, the creative people, not being fearful. And it takes people like yourselves to put your head above the parapet. And hey, what happens from now on, who knows? But at least you've taken that first step, which is, as I've always said before, you're going to inspire somebody you'll never probably meet, and you'll inspire other people that you'll never meet. And that's the essence of what we're doing. And to me, anyone that doesn't do that and is a creative person and wants to sit behind a brick wall and go, well, I'm not going to do that. To me, I just think it's, you're not fulfilling yourself as to the fullest extent of what you are as a human being. Now, on this general one, and a bit of a left sort of turn and crashing into it, there's 2 points I wanted to make. You were talking about, the starving, the angle of no money and stuff like this. Have you, I looked at your your website, and I've looked at, what you do, and I don't notice anywhere, you haven't got anywhere to, anybody can, donate to you with Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. Is that a deliberate choice, or is it something you've not looked into?
No, that's simply ignorance on my part. I've heard the terms thrown around, but I don't know much about them. What's on my website now is 2 separate ways to pay using PayPal, and that's just all that I know. I'm building this from the ground up, so anything that you can share with me, if you think that that's something that would be beneficial. I certainly need to learn a lot more and surround myself with more people who can become vested in this.
Well, I would definitely recommend you go into this, because one of the great things about having, it's another source. I'm not saying take all your PayPal's down. It's just another ability for somebody to donate and promote and generally help you in what you're doing. And I'll send you some links tonight. This is one of the great things, and take it from somebody who is a creative person. I'm not Mr. Technical in any sense, but I'm living proof that you can do this. It's very easy to do, and the great thing is it gives abilities for more people to sort of come in and fund you and support you. And it's, I get asked a lot of times with so many creative people I have on this podcast, and I'm about to have it tonight. People can say, oh, I've had it leading up to this. People going, oh yeah, I love what she's doing, but I can't give her any cryptocurrencies and stuff like this. So that's a very simple one to do, and again, that can be done. But I would definitely recommend it. And I'll be happy to talk you through it, because, and something me and Lee have spoken about many times. I think this is just generally where the whole momentum of us as a species is going. We're doing we had the time when we separated the church and the state, and what we're going through now, we're separating currency from the state, and that is such a powerful elemental force of what we're doing. And I don't think we realize what we're actually doing, and how revolutionary in the old sense of the word what this is actually about. But it's inevitable this is going to happen. So yeah, I would not only would I highly recommend it, I will talk you through it. I'm sure Lee's in your part of the world, he can talk you through it. And because anything that's going to reward you, because as you said before, this is one of the things that people particularly who aren't creative, and that they like you were quite alluding to earlier on. It's we still got to put food in our belly. We still got to pay rent, and this is, they think, oh well, you do it for the love, and no. I don't want to live in a world. I don't want them to think, oh God, poor old Jen's, sitting there starving in some camper van for the love of it. I don't want that. I want you to be rewarded in the fullest sense. Not because I know you're driven by money, because that's one of the things that you do get with a lot of common with creative people. It's not money that drives us. Now, I haven't heard you once say the money is the drive for it, but hey, I don't, anything that's going to reward you and give you the ability to carry on what you're doing. Hey, I mean, I can only speak for myself. I would happily donate to you to do what you're doing, because any small thing I can do to keep you doing and keep what you're and support what you're doing, to me is only a good thing. And anything to raise awareness of what you're doing is only a good thing. So again, that's something maybe you need to sort of, as I said before the podcast, you need to go and either see Lee or get Lee out of his farm to come and see you. I'm throwing that responsibility over to you, Lee. You're closer to me than I am.
Yeah, there's a lot we can do. It's really hard to monetize yourself. I live in a sort of state of poverty of choice, and it's only because I'm really not interested in money. Although I need to eat. All the people that come and go get sustained here, and so I keep going back to what you were saying earlier about regard, regarding like creating a space for ourselves to bring forward our true self, because that's our message. Every person's message is who they are, and what I like about you, Jen, is your writing style it has that regard, because you don't necessarily need to put your opinion in, but you can put your you can write with your worldview, with your open worldview, because you've seen things, and it's evident in the writing. And it's also evident that you're wise enough to know that it's not just about you, and it's about how everyone will eventually need to just come together on whatever subjects that we're working with or talking about, and it's about mythology. It's about writing that mythology, because ultimately the only voice, and we were talking about Colorado and the laws. Those laws are coming about by people that write, but they're not coming from a creative side. They're coming from that mechanical, sort of matrix machine side. and it's all about money and profit. But we can create through writing, through a network and community of writers. We can create our own mythology and begin to tell a new story. And that story includes everyone's voice. It's not just one side's voice. And that's why I'm so excited about your project. I think that there's going to be good things to come of it. And it may take time for those messages to get out there. They usually, what I found is that you tell a story, and it takes time. People think about it, they hear it, they think about it for a while, and then it becomes part of their worldview, sort of. And we've got enough stories in mythology and in the media and in the world that talk about everything that's negative and everything that we need to fear. What we need to talk about and have more stories of is all the positive things that we have in our world, in our existence, and our potential. And so that's where the magic, the new people that create the world, the wizards, the sorcerers, they're writers. I actually put a link up about a guy that does. He talks about magic and what it meant in the old world. And it all stems from writing, and writing is a very powerful thing. And you mentioned you couldn't hold a job down or whatever. I don't think we need to be holding jobs. We need to be doing what we're passionate about. And since writing is such an important thing, and we need so many people to do what you're doing, and I think that you doing it in the way that you're doing it, in sort of an impoverished state, is commendable. And I agree with Tim that you definitely deserve reward. And it seems as time goes on, there's more and more opportunities to get that kind of a reward. I don't know. I don't necessarily like a platform like Steemit because of certain issues, but your kind of story is the kind of story that may get a significant more feed, and that's something that you could get paid through. Although I don't know if anybody in that platform will ever actually get paid, because those are some of the things that I don't trust about it. And as far as bitcoins and things like that, you can certainly set up a wallet and have a donation, but it's in my experience, it's still not there. It's still not there at the point where people are going to pay you in Bitcoin, and you'll be able to support yourself on that. Even the people that are in crypto currency news and everything else have a hard time supporting themselves doing that. So it's always supporting ourselves is always a big issue, and I sort of attack that personally by trying to limit my need, limiting what I personally need in this world, and I boiled it down to I need a bed that's undisturbed that I can go to, that I can count on being there. I need and good food, and warmth. So all the basics, and then everything else is extra. And I think that regard is the word I've been meditating on. That we don't really have a whole lot of regard for one another in our society, because we're living in a material world, and we believe that all the material things are what we need to seek and go after. And so if we regard ourselves as getting what we need all the time, above and beyond those basic needs, it begins to take away from everybody else. And I had a little parable earlier in the day, and I said, if you have everything under the sun, if you have a palace and everything else, but you know that other people are suffering, how can you enjoy that palace? So I mean, the only way I'm going to be able to enjoy a nice palace with a swimming pool and a Ferrari on the garage and everything is if everybody else has that too. That's sort of the regard, I think. And so we can work towards that sort of goal, and we may never see that in our lifetimes. But we can create a story, and we can create a legacy and mythology that may last through words, through language, through the new writing of code, and so on and so forth. and recreate how we tell our stories, rather than them just being from a dark, two-sided duality consciousness type thing where there's light and dark or good and evil. We can get into a place where we're actually all very connected and close, more closely knit than we would ever suspect. But that'll hand to somebody else.
Well, yeah, totally, Lee. And I think this sort of alludes to what we were discussing earlier on. I mean, it's all about networks. It's all about the human interaction, and we, we've discussed this before, many times. But it's at the 0 point, like you said before. The whole the main gate, aim of what it's all about is, like you say, is to be loving, and that is ultimately, it boils down to love or hate. And when you boil it down to, I'll give you an example, and I've always said this to you, Lee. Personally, if you're ever over in Scotland, me Cass your Cass, and I mean that, and that's beyond money, that's beyond anything. This is the forming of what I love about these tools, because we are just a species, as Jen was quite rightly saying before. We don't know anything about anything, and we're just cocoon moment. We're just about to break through and become a butterfly that won't even be recognizable to us in a few years' time. What us as a species is going to look like, let alone the world. But the great thing is we've got the ability to connect and dissolve all these barriers and do things. And like I said before, I have a great love for writing and stuff like this, and the power of words, as you said before, Jen, goes right back to before. What led you to sit in a closet in the dark and read a book? This is the thing, because somebody somewhere before that wrote that down and actually did the effort, and this is what I'm saying. And that person, when they're writing that book that you were reading, they wouldn't have thought, oh, if I do this, what's going to happen is some girl in Colorado is going to read it, she's going to sit in her closet, and then X amount of years later, she's going to go off and do a podcast. They didn't think of that, but it was the doing. And it's, as Lee just quite rightly said, it's the doing that separates the creative from the person that sits in fear. And by doing, it's like before. What I love about Minds, you get the platform itself. You sort of realize that, okay, I'll do that. And as you quite rightly know, Jenny, you alluded to it earlier on, you can reach out to people, and people will come along, and you start to realize that, okay, this, we can build things. It is within our reach, and this is one of the great awakening moments I think we're going through as a species, that we can do anything we like. There is nobody to stop us. There's, all we're facing is people who have stood between us and our potential, saying you can't. This is this because some old, some rule written 100 years ago, or because of some mentality that's just been driven on through the lizard brain for all these thousands of years. But we're breaking out of that, and we are forming. And this is what, like you were saying, Lee. This is where people like Jen and people like yourself and myself and all this, the platforms like Minds, we're building stuff, and that to me is so inspiring, because okay, it helps us on an individual level, and we're not all, but it's going to be what this is going to mean to people rolling out in the future. That is the greatest thing, because as I said before, if we didn't have the Dickens and the Van Goghs and the creative people back in the day, we wouldn't be here right now. And that's why I was saying before, you need that braveness to step out and face the world and say, hey, I've got a voice, and do you know what, my voice is as relevant as anybody else's out there. And that's overcoming that fear is something that we creative we struggle with the most. Now, before I kind of really want, before we go into, I have to really kind of talk to you, Jen, and about your and it was the first time again. First time I heard this was kind of, just looking to what you did through Minds, and I was like, okay, so. And I had never heard of the Dudism, and the fact you can become a Dudist priest and stuff like this. And so again, that's something else that I would love to hear. How did you get into it? And just sort of like enlighten me more about what Dudism is, and the sort of the whole sort of thought process behind that.
Sure, and I certainly don't claim to be an expert on that either, but it has captured and held my interest for a long time. It's not a glamorous story. I was introduced to Dudism. The first point I remember is obviously because of the Coen brothers movie, The Big Lebowski, and and all of the different, things that were in that. Of course, that's one of those movies that you watch on different levels. And the first level is a level that could not have comprehended anything about the backstory, or where the characters came from, or that they were based on real people. Uh, and I enjoyed it enough. I wanted to watch it again. So it's one of those movies that I can go back to, even if I just watch it once a year, say. I'll go back and realize that I have, in that year's time, since I last visited that piece of material, which really is what it is, right, in the film form, I will now pick up things that I didn't understand before, and while I enjoyed it, I didn't realize that was a reference to this or it was a reference to that. And so I'm turned on by anything that's created that can make me, who knows nothing about anything, keep coming back for more, even though it's the same format, the same film, whether it's remastered or, and I'm the same way with music. I can't always give you a real specific answer of why I love something, but that movie is one of those things. Another big one for me is The Men Who Stare at Goats, but that's another subject entirely with John Ronson. But so I loved the movie, and then that caused me to start looking things up. And because of that, I found this website. It's dudism.com, and I find out that it's actually a real religion. Obviously, the conversion process is fairly laid back, which and when you find points like that you can laugh about, because somebody somewhere behind the scenes goes, hey, that's funny, whether it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago or somebody I'll never meet, I got their joke. And that's what I kind of found with this website. And it was started by a journalist, I believe, out of Thailand. I don't know a lot about Dudism, but I was driven to become an ordained Dudist priest because I figured, what could it hurt? And I liked learning things like, looking at the set design for when Jeff Bridges was in the bathroom. What was around the bathroom? There was a bottle of Mr. Bubble. There was a copy of Being in Nothingness. Things like that. And then also they put these events together like Lebowski Fest, which I believe is annually. I also recently looked into Gonzo Fest, and the two clash in my brain a lot, with the Hunter Thompson influence and then the Big Lebowski influence. I really had fun with those, enjoyed them a lot. Anyhow, they have this Lebowski Fest, I think once a year. I think it actually started in a bowling alley, kind of as a joke, and then turned into this, big festival. But I'm going to be learning a lot more about that sometime between now and September 9th. Because the next podcast that I'm going on that isn't the one that called The Order of the Dude. It's called the Dudecast. And I don't know when I'm going to be on it. I just know it's going to be within the next 30 days or so. But by the nature of the thing, I probably shouldn't be so uptight about what time I'm supposed to be there. A lot of these people don't even use zippers because, that's too constricting, or, I'm making that assumption. So there's a gentleman and his wife that are here in town in Colorado Springs, which is where I am. And they're here meeting with a stand-up comedian who they've interviewed before on their podcast, and so we'll see what happens. But I have so many questions because I want to learn more. Buddhism, like a Catholic would claim theirs or anything like that, but it's fascinating so far. So I will keep you posted.
Well, on the Jeff Bridges one, I've just posted it in the private chat box. I mean, one of my favourite Jeff Bridges films, and it's quite relevant to the conversation that we've had tonight. Is, I was going to say to you, both of you two, have you seen Fearless by Jeff Bridges?
No, I have not, but I did just see the link, so I will soon. That's the way. When these are the rabbit holes I follow, so I appreciate it.
like I say, I highly recommend it because personally I think it's one of Jeff Bridges' best films, but that's my own one. Now, Jen, I have to sort of ask you, it's something I'm fascinated in, from my years of writing and stuff like this. And when you are writing, and you mentioned earlier on that you put the call out to minds to help you edit and stuff like this. On the actual creative process, when do you find that you're most creative? Do you sit down on a technical level? Will you sit down on? I mean, two things. Do you write hand, pen on paper, or do you write on laptop? And what time of day do you tend to do this? I've spoken to many people, and it's a tendency in myself. It tends to be around just before or just after sleep. So sometimes it's just before I go to sleep, I can be, a surge of creativity comes out, and equally sometimes when I wake up in the morning, a surge of creativity comes out. So from a technical point of view, like I say, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. Being a journalist, what you do.
For me personally, those periods before sleep and right after sleep are always good points. I wouldn't say that those are the craziest for me. And there's a certain craziness just in learning how to think out loud. Something I've been trying to use a digital voice recorder to take verbal notes and then go back and transcribe those verbal notes onto pen and paper. I avoid the laptop as much as I can. I don't mean to sound anti-technology. It's just I can get so distracted and so overwhelmed, and I can't hear the right, because I'm listening for a music of sorts. I'm listening for, the way I know how to edit a sentence is by how it feels and how it sounds, and that's best at the quietest times, which allow me to go the craziest, but I need external quiet and internal just cacophony, I mean just chaos. And the most important part of that for me is finding a way to be able to surround myself with other human beings who are somehow able to watch a person put themselves into a psychosis of sorts for the sake of this article that doesn't exist yet, that they know they want to write, and treating the thing as if it's going to be the biggest thing I've ever done, knowing that it's not, but just because it's not mine and it is coming to me in a way. So I have to find places where I feel safe, and that's not always easy. It's hard on the people that are around you when you go into this writer creative state that's almost like a psychosis, and just trying to help you survive, because you're, that it's assumed that it's a negative. Use your powers for. So I don't know necessarily about a time of day. I notice that I also use note cards a lot. And I have a lot of spiral notebooks that I will scribble in and then I'll throw away from fear that someone will see them. And I know this sounds crazy, but I will throw away my own work because I know, but I do it because I have that thought of, what if somebody sees this and thinks it's a fucking manifesto? And no, I'm not saying those people are standing over me looking for the shit. I admit to being a paranoid. What was it William Burroughs said about paranoids? They know only a little of what's going on, something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. I have found that I do have more creative times of year, and every year I can tell you, looking back, that are fractured. Looking back, my most creative time is from the end of August to the beginning of December, and it's ups and it's downs and it's panics and it's whatever it is, but it's my most creative time. And if I have more faith that is able to be, if that makes sense.
Jen, I found it absolutely fascinating that you tap into two things. Then one was the fact that you write in hand, which I do the same. Maybe because I'm an artist and I like, I've always, it's a very much a discipline to me because it's, yeah, you're right. I can sit in front of my laptop right now and it's got autocorrect and da 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 da. But you realise, and I've seen this with so many of my pals and friends who, because they spend all their lifetime on the laptop or on the phone, and you get to, you go to them, oh, sit and write me just a page of, an A4 page of, whatever, and their handwriting is, they'll get to the end of it and they go, oh shit, I've lost the skill of handwriting, and it's just this blur of. So I think it's fascinating you're keeping that old school art, like, because I think there's an element of what you just said, and I'm fascinated because you're one of the few people I've ever who's ever echoed what I've always thought on this. I think there's an essence of putting ink or onto paper that is completely different from the laptop in the sense because it's just a more natural state of what you're doing, and I'm fascinated by that. And the other one I'm very fascinated by, Jen, is when you mentioned then about times of year and stuff like that. Now that's something else again. That's something I thought for a long time, and it's always to extrapolate this out. It's always fascinating to me that some of the, you look around the world. I've lived, I've been fortunate to live around the world and stuff like this. But the more colder regions, see, take it a step back. For me, my creative time, if you look at it overall, I would say is winter. And this goes back to the point I'm making. I think it's always struck me that some of the most initiative things have happened in Northern Europe or where it's cold. Because trust me, I mean, I don't know what it's like in Colorado, man, but when those nights, I mean, we have the same thing over in Scotland. We're having, in the summer it's the light is out till you can walk around at 1 o'clock in the morning and it's still light in the sense, and the sun will rise again at 3 o'clock in the morning. So the days are huge, but the reverse is in the winter and everything becomes cold and you have no choice. It forces you into your bunker. You can't go out sitting there in the sun like you would do in Los Angeles 24/7 365 a year. You have certain periods, and that's when I find me that when the winter sets in, boom, creativity just flourishes in me, and I'm fascinated that the two things that I've always sort of thought, that I've spoken to many creative people, and then you're the only person I've ever known that sort of brought this up about time of year and writing on paper. And I don't know with Colorado. I mean, you sort of said that your time of where you are now. What does Colorado get like in the winter? When we're talking heavy snow, and does that not affect you when it gets really cold and wintry? What do you find in those times? Are you just reading a lot and soaking up information? I mean, do you have a deliberate strategy for that, or do you just go, right, okay, I'm just going to spend the next few months, I'm not going to have any plans, and I'm just going to let it all soak in? Or is there actual, um, you know, set things you'll do? You'll read a lot in the winter months, or those times you're not creative, you'll watch a lot, or you're doing a lot of study. Or, I mean, do you have any sort of set thoughts on this, or is it just literally, I'm not creative, I'm just going to let it happen and let life sink in? I mean, when you're in not that creative moments, what's your viewpoint? I mean, how do you tackle those times when you're not creative? Because it's one of the things that people who aren't creative or who are creative, it's one of the hardest times. I mean, the best times of life, like you say, when I'm an artist, and is when it's great when you're creative. That's great times. The worst times you feel like, oh, is this ever going to come back? And it's learning to almost trust yourself and find ways to get through those times when you're not in that surge of creativity. So again, what's your techniques, your how you approach those times when you're not being creative? And does that tie again into the coldness of winter over in Colorado?
I'm not sure if it ties in directly, but it makes sense to me. I don't feel like I have to be creative all the time. I mean, why would I take this thing that I'm breaking out and doing and try to force it into a 9-to-5 cubicle sort of mentality? So I guess what I've done is I've submitted to the creativity, and of course that's a scary place to be, but it's in charge. And so those times where I'm not feeling creative, what I'd like to do is, it's not all about me and what I can produce, but, that's where I go back to those people in my life who are willing to deal with the crazy, and that's where what can I do for other people? But when this thing drives me, I have to be able to go, okay, I have to do this now, but I promise I'll be back. And so, I mean, everybody needs downtime, and any time that I'm not driven crazy by, like compelled to write, that's when it's time for my people, my close circle, my puppy, my whatever it is. And I know, based on the cycle, looking back honestly, like this 13 weeks is going to be crazy, but there's going to be some serious downtime after that. I'm not going to sign any have to be able to do this winter, in the summertime, because I don't know if it can be done. We'll see, but I'm not signing anything away. And the people I am working with who are paying me for articles that are outside of like the podcast and the book, it's all fine, and they're letting me have the independent ownership of these other things that I'm doing. There's there's never a lack of something to do, but it's up to this book. The first time I wrote down the words "crazy as crazy does," I was living in a hotel. I had just been evicted, and it would have been around 2010 after, yeah, that's all that's important. It would have been about 2010, and living in a hotel after having been evicted. And somehow I found it important, putting all of my belongings into storage, I found it really important to keep 2 whiteboards out and screw those into the hotel wall, even if they charged me for it. And, it's those little things like that looking back. And so maybe I only work 13 weeks a year. Who knows? I'm not in charge of this thing, and I would be truly crazy to believe that I were. Was that even an answer?
I'm more fascinated, Jen, because I think this is again, you just said then, and I was just initially thinking you said I'll only maybe work 30. It's not work. Every day is work. That's the point. I mean, I think the essence of one of the great things that people who aren't creative and they sit and look at people who are us the creative and they go, oh, you have it so easy, and you're like, no, just because when I switch off this podcast, it doesn't mean say I stop working. Everything I do, and this is what I'm trying to allude to, even the moments when you're sitting back staring at the mountains that I can see on your little image or stuff, or just being quiet, this is work. That 4-letter word has been such a crucifix for humanity. Everything is work, and it's, to me, it's the essence of getting up every day, struggling with what we're doing. That's the working itself. Bringing up kids, having just getting through life. The 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 work element of of what you were talking about, it's just, it again goes back to what you were saying before. This is someone else who's looking and saying, oh, if you're doing a certain amount of time, you're doing this. And it's not really. I mean, everything we're doing, everything we do, everything we create, and this is what I'm saying to people, because people say, oh, but God, you haven't done anything for it. And I'm like, did you realize how much of the work that you think, for any, I don't, when I paint, it's not just the effort I do into painting the thing. A lot of it is just having the non. It's like the yin to the yang. I need time when I don't have anything. I don't think about anything. And in essence, people go, oh, you just sit around. It's not. That to me is work. It's the work of soaking it up. And this is one of the things that I find, and I'd be fascinated to talk to you. And I'm really inspired by the way, and like I said, I think you've got a very enlightened way of looking at this, of having, like I said, a chunk and then having some time off. Because one of the things that I find, and I've met creative people before, I've met a tendency I can go down, is you can burn yourself out and you'll put all your effort in and all your effort in, and it's almost like the more you sort of think, oh, okay, I've only got a short time and but you just burn yourself out, and that doesn't do anyone any good. So I think it's really enlightened that you've got that balanced approach to it, already. Now, before we do wrap this up in the last sort of 5 minutes, Jen, I mean, you've spoken about your podcast. I'll be putting links up to where they can find you. Now, you talked about you're going to go out on this, on this tour with this podcast. for anyone maybe listening tonight, or anyone that I have in my network, or just Lee's network in generally, or mine in generally, well, is there any, for people who are out there who maybe want to help, or get involved, or can support you anyway? We've talked about how we can reward you with different, like cryptocurrencies or PayPal and stuff like that. But is there any particular call that you want to put out there to people that they can support you and help you, reward you in any way possible? Are you looking for guests? Are you looking for venues? I mean, is there anything particular that, given this platform right now, you can put the call out to the world and the universe, and ask for it, because
The way that I'm going about it right now is I'm looking for one angel investor, um, and I'm willing to talk to anybody about that. I guess the best way to contact me would be through that Bathtub Gen website. There's a page that says HMU for hit me up, and it just sends me an email. Or, my email address and my phone number are on the front page of the site. So I'm absolutely open to contact and ideas. And so, so anyway, so there's one angel investor, and then the rest of the funding for the project, which I'm kind of looking at almost like a dig, like some type of archaeological dig. The way I'm doing that is there are 13 sponsorships available total, and with those I'm looking for fully regulated, legitimate cannabis industry businesses in the state of Colorado, one per city or county that I'm headed to, and that schedule is lined out there too, and it's everything from the southern part, Pueblo and Manitou Springs, all the way up to Aspen. I'm gonna make my way up I-25 and across 70 and into Aspen and back, and stay pretty close to the interstates. And I've got ideas for where I would like to stay during those times, but it requires funding, and so there they're sponsored, and so they are going to sponsor the first episode, which is September 12th, and so there are 12 more open spots at $420 each, plus the angel investor money, which is right around $4,000 from an angel investor. And next be, it's not there to be a sort of vested interest, and I'm going to be working through the attorney, not just asking family and friends for money so that I can jump in a van and tour the state even. That's not what we're doing here, but I guess the best way is to contact me through the website, and there's a copy of my business card there, so there's phone number, there's email, and if it's, and simply I've asked people if they'd like to donate through PayPal on the homepage. I set the number out there at just $4.20, because that adds up really quickly. And so, and I've had some individuals do that, and it made me happier, I think, than it's going to make me even to get that angel investor money, just to get several little hits of $4.20 each. That motivated me more than I could tell you. And I'm so grateful that you understand that while I talk a lot about money right now, it's a survival thing, and it's not because get rich or die trying. That's not happening in this case. And I'm just really glad to be here, and I thank you so much.
I was about to say, Jen, I don't think there's a person on this planet who would ever take going on the road of being a creative or a journalist or a writer with the fucking dream to be a millionaire, because it's never going to happen. Let's be real, man. It's never going to happen. So you're absolutely right, because this is what I was trying to say earlier on. It was the point I was trying to make about, well, I'll talk to you after we finish this up, about getting some sort of crypto wallet up there, because it's the same. It's the little drops, the drips, the drips, the drips that all add up at the end of the time. Well, as I said, it's been absolute an honour and a privilege, and again to you, Lee. It was good catching up with you, and
Yeah, I appreciate coming on. It's been great to hear you, Jen, and your story, and the exciting things that you'll be writing about here in the near future, and I'm excited to follow along. And thank you again. It's been a great podcast.
Well, yeah, and before we do, before we do stop, go, I mean, just quickly, you made a very brave move. I think it's almost be amiss me not to sort of finish it before we do go to finish it. So you put an thing out the last sort of few days about how you've left Facebook and stuff like that. So basically, the main one that people can find you on is at Bathtub General Minds. Is that probably one of the better places for people to go and to sort of tap you up and reach out to you up there as well, other than your website? Because you seem to be very proactive on that on Minds.
I am. I am. I don't use Facebook. I have an account, but it's deactivated. I don't use Twitter. I don't use Instagram. I use Minds, and it's because, well, there are a lot of reasons that I encourage people to check out for themselves. But yeah, you won't find me on any other social network right now. And I don't necessarily have plans to expand the social networks and clamor for people to like me or anything like that. I have found true inspiration at Minds, and there's something called landmines. Are you familiar with that? Um, uh, Anyhow, big fan of Minds, and so that's where you need to look for me if you want to look for me on social networking.
Well, perfect, Jen. As I said before, it's been an absolute honour and a pleasure, and you know, doors always open. Doors, on this. If you ever need to have a chat or anything you need to talk about, or just generally, because there's so much. I mean, we scratched the surface today, but there's so much more we could do about. And I definitely want to have you back on as a guest after you've done your 13-week tour and you're in that that chill zone. So I definitely we have to get you on after that. And again, I'm looking forward to. I'm actually it's like a kid at Christmas. I'm looking forward to hearing your weekly podcast and like I said, you keep doing what you're doing. To coin a phrase that I use a lot. Keep staying positive. You keep going out there and you're doing it because, as I said to you, you're inspiring people you're never going to meet, and you just keep doing it because, as I said, it's greatly inspiring, and yeah, you just keep doing it because, like we were saying, the only way to conquer fear and the barriers that we talk about is people like yourself putting your head above the parapet and doing what you're doing. So like I say, it's been an absolute honour and absolute privilege to both to catch up with you, Lee, and you, Jen. And well, for me over here in Scotland and all the way over there in Colorado, it's life is people.